Hi there. This is the third and final one of the trilogy of videos I'm making breaking down George R. R. Martin's latest blog post. The first one he's made really in 4 months about Game of Thrones related projects. And I left this one for the end. It's got the last 2 out of 7 points I had about it because it's a bit more speculative. And the 2 things I want to cover in this are an issue Martin brings up is this is a very different format from the other projects. Even House of the Dragon, in terms of the scale and the fight for the throne, is similar enough to the War of the Five Kings storyline in Game of Thrones. This is a much smaller scale. There aren't going to be full-scale battles in the first season, maybe in later seasons, but definitely not the first 3, because this was a conscious choice. It's a different format. It's a smaller scale on purpose. And that is an open-ended question. And the second issue is, a lot of us are actually discussing this now among the YouTube channel community and on social media. It was one brief line. Is Martin softening his stance on House of the Dragon for all the changes since last he talked about it? Well, to start with, Martin himself talking about how it's stylistically different. Quote, "Viewers who are looking for action and more action and only action, well, this one may not satisfy you. There's a huge fight scene here, as exciting as anyone could ask for, but there are no dragons this time around, no huge, large-scale battles, no White Walkers. This is a character piece, and its focus is on duty and honor, on chivalry and all it means. Can you be a true knight? That the whole thing is this petty tyrant Targaryen prince beats up a woman in full view of the crowd and no one thinks to intervene except this lowly knight for hire, and the great lords and honorable knights do nothing, and him going, do you even believe in your own value system? And then eventually someone does, and all of that stuff about, yes, we do have a code, it's not all cynicism. And even though there is corruption, some people believe in that, but it's a smaller scale. Think of it in terms of if House of the Dragon episode 1 of season 1 was this tourney scene, we were remarking on, oh yeah, like the tourney stuff in Dunk and Egg, because Dunk and Egg is entirely set place at a tourney in the first novella. So you'd see a lot of tourney jousting, and I think, the Daemon jousting and that with the horses was exciting, and people would be into that for action. And then at the climax, they have a trial by combat, but then Aerion Brightflame says, I challenge you to the archaic trial of 7, that you have to choose 6 other champions to fight with you, so it's 7 versus 7, 2 teams. So it's this big 7-on-7 joust, tourney, duel to the death, and all of that happens. So I think you can film a fight scene very well. I was so weirded out after episode 2 of House of the Dragon season 2. And not just me, a lot of other channel leaders are going, we had people in our comment sections going they were bored by this episode. What? Specifically, where's my dragon battle? Where's my dragon battle? And not just all the drama that was happening in most of the episode. It ended with this very well done epic duel between the Cargill twins. I wasn't even expecting to enjoy that. Some people were trying to hype it up before because they try to hype up everything because they're clickbaiters. I thought, it'll be this duel, but watching it and then seeing the work that went into it behind the scenes, I was really impressed with the Cargill Bowl. The duel between the Cargill twins, and the emotion that they worked in, that they're yelling and proclaiming their love even as they're brutally fighting each other. And in terms of fight choreography as a science, that was a very well done fight choreography and drama scene that doesn't involve a large-scale battle or dragon. So I think they've already proven actual Reactor channels, people who, not Song of Ice and Fire reviewers, but mainstream Reactors, loved Cargill Bowl. They thought it was amazing. So I'm not sure if the clickbaiters who were going, where's my dragon battle? And then by episode 4, you got a dragon battle, and then were annoyed there wasn't one in episode 5 and said, this season is terrible and I'm quitting. And then episode 7 had good dragon scenes again. Where's your attention span? I don't know, but it is a smaller scale thing, but that makes it more focused. And point is just, I worry about how much there were problems in House of the Dragon season 2, pacing issues because of the strike, but even if the pacing had been better, there weren't going to be literally Battle of Rook's Rest scale event in every single episode. There's 2, maybe 3 big action scenes a sequence per season. And it was just so weirding out that with nothing left to do but sit in the dark and gnaw on their own ego, the clickbaiters built this up to more than it could ever possibly be. And I wonder, was House of the Dragon Season 1 had a lot less action in it? Season 2 had more than Season 1 in terms of raw action scenes. Is it because people thought the show would fail, so they didn't waste time overhyping it before it came out? Compared to Season 2, where this is going to be action, action, action. We're like, we don't even think they're going to get to... Even if they'd done Battle of the Gullet in Season 2, I think people would have been annoyed by Episode 5. That, how many seasons do you think this show will run? So I'm rambling here. It was just Martin himself saying it is a character piece. There are fight scenes between humans, even a 7 versus 7 epic joust scene. But it's not magical creatures. There are no dragons. It's dragons died out a few decades ago, but are still, the last few stunted ones are in living memory. That Dunk's elderly knight that he's a squire to, who dies in the first thing, right at the beginning, Sir Arlen said when he was a boy, he saw the last dragon, but it was sickly and stunted and died within a year. So it's just when it's passing living memory. Egg, who's a child in this, is Daenerys' great-grandfather. So I am more interested, I'm also more interested that it's closer to Game of Thrones. You'll start seeing characters like Walder Frey would show up in Season 3 as this 3-year-old that everyone thinks is really annoying. But getting ahead of myself, just, will Season 1 manage to hook people? We're not even going to get into Season 3 yet. I just worry about, and just, I'm making this so you can mouth off the comments. You see why it's a speculative, I left it for last. Just how much people were about action. It's got to be action. And there were things I would have trimmed or streamlined for pacing reasons in Season 2. But you know what I'm talking about. You experienced it with me. The people going, why isn't there another dragon battle? If you explain very clearly, we don't have the first trailer yet. What if the first trailer very clearly says, the dragons are dead and starting to pass from living memory, because only old people even remember them? Will people still be into this? How do you sell this? I'm not sure. Because we know it's a good story, because on top of everything, it is the only other prequel, it is the only prequel that is fully narrativized, that exists in prose text. Even Fire and Blood is an in-universe history book. There's a lot of gaps in it, which I give the writing staff leeway on. It's not exactly like they're strictly following a narrativized book, versus Dunk and Egg is fully narrativized. It's even had graphic novel adaptations. So maybe, I think, 0.6 out of 7 here is, I think the tighter character focus will make up for that. Because many reviewers have consistently said, don't take my word for it, like Preston Jacobs' Red Team Review, many others. In terms of, it's hard to quantify this, the tightness of the writing. This is some of Martin's best writing. Just line by line, and the art of the imagery he's using, and it's just describing a guy going around at a tournament field in the first part, trying to, with limited money, cobble together enough gear that he can get into the tourney, but just line by line, and you're in his head all the time. It's just really good. You feel like you're there with Dunk, even before there's any action scenes, and then those are really good, and the issues it involves and all of that. So it's not that, this was a terrible idea. It's a different format. It's difference between a really good, I'm just thinking of this up spur of the moment, a really good one-shot Marvel movie with a small cast that's a character piece versus Avengers Endgame, which is this massive crossover, you know? That it's a difference in scale, that it's also a selling point. It has a smaller cast is a good thing, because they've had trouble juggling that many cast members. Anything would. Game of Thrones completely failed in this. House of the Dragon is limited by it's only got an outline. So it's not as if they're following a book with a lot of characters. And how do you juggle this many people? That Season 2, in the book, Rhaenyra is bedridden after her stillbirth through most of the events of Season 2. So I don't blame them for, well, you couldn't really think of anything for Rhaenyra to do, but you kept putting her on screen. Well, people expect her to be on screen, and it's weird that in the source material she doesn't do that much at that point. So I sympathize. It doesn't make it good, but I sympathize this wasn't really meant to be narrativized like that, or it hadn't been. And how do you juggle that many characters and give them all screen time? without cutting anyone. They're not going to cut anyone from this. The other problem is there were so many characters, like in even House of the Dragon Season 1, just focused on Season 1, which we all agree was pretty good. It took people, the casual people, a while to get used to, wait a minute, there's also Cousin Rhaenys, and the Valarians, and Laena and Laenor, but now they're having children. The family, well, you're supposed to look at the family tree on the website and keep track of it, and now here's 5 more kids by episode 6, who are all main characters, is a lot to keep track of. Versus, most of this story is Dunk and Egg. They walk the earth and get into adventures, like Caine and Kung Fu. And there are recurring characters because obviously the leaders of not even all the great houses. I mean, like, Laughing Storm Lionel Baratheon's important because in a future one he tries to have a marriage alliance between his son and Egg's daughter. That's obviously the future. Or members of the royal family, but it's easy to keep track of because Egg is the 4th in line. He's the 4th son of a 4th son. And a lot of them die in the plague. That it's his older brother Aerion, who's insane. There's Aemon hasn't been cast yet. Maekar, his father is there, so it's a more limited number of people. I mean, Dunk's an orphan. He doesn't have any family. So I think that the fact that the Dunk and Egg novellas literally only have one POV character, Dunk. You're never even in Egg's head. You're never in Aegon the Fifth's head as a POV. It's all from Dunk's POV, so you're not even juggling those, and it makes it a lot more focused. So I think the smaller scale is a selling point. They did say, because it's smaller scale, we can film it faster and actually crank it out at the rate of every 12 months. You'll be getting a new season for at least 3 years, until we hit up that there isn't a finished novella yet. As I said last video, I think Martin could get out the 4th and 5th novellas before they run into that. It would have to be a 7-season thing, though, but I think Season 7 will be the 3rd Blackfire Rebellion. That'll end this series. And then there's a 10-year time skip, and then they'll have to make this other combined series with that and the Rise of Tywin, but that's 7 years from now. I think the different scale could work, but Martin touches on this of, if you're just trying to clickbait this as nothing but dragon action, I think the clickbaiters will have trouble with this show and won't like how beloved these stories are when it is a different style. In other posts, they even said it's relatively funny, as the novellas have for this wry sense of humor. The source novellas are tonally different. They're a little more lighthearted. There's still action and death in them, but they're funnier because Martin's witty, but it's different enough. I wonder if people will be into this or not. But then again, there is a groundswell of support. If this was the first prequel that Martin made, it's been popular since the 90s, and it's the only one that's fully narrativized. I think will be a selling point that it's easier for people to jump into. Whereas House of the Dragon promised huge battles, that inherently means a lot of characters that people had difficulty keeping track of. I am looking forward to seeing mainstream Reactor channels watching this when it comes out, they said, in fall. And that it'll be a lot easier to keep up with because it's all set over a few days in one location at a tournament ground. And starts at the inn outside, one place, Ashford. So, fine. That's my rambling start of this. The other issue is, this is my final point, and I left it for last because it's speculative. I cannot make any sense of this one thing Martin said, because he said it very briefly for one line. I can't tell if he's being sarcastic. That he said that, well, he hasn't been keeping up with all the blog posts he wanted to make about what 2024 and his Europe trip were like. He says, I'm back into now the holidays are over to be making new blog posts about what Worldcon was like, the Alfie Awards that he holds. They're named after Alfred Bester, that they're after the Hugo nonsense with the sad puppies he made the Alfies, and his really big experience visiting Tolkien's grave and all of that, and thinking on his legacy. He says he's going to be making other blog posts, but his full remark was, for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, it's as faithful an adaptation as a reasonable man could hope for. Parentheses, and you all know how incredibly reasonable I am on that particular subject. I'm pausing for emphasis. Wait, what? It's as faithful as any reasonable man could hope for, and you all know how incredibly reasonable I am on that particular subject. And this has sparked a lot of discussion. I'm sorry to bury it here, but I might revisit it because Preston Jacobs and Red Team Review were just talking about this. I actually jumped in the chat on Preston's live stream and asked him, I'll link it in the description box below. It was 2 hours, 45 minutes in, and they talk about it for 4 minutes. That Preston says he looked at the same thing, and we can't decide, is this Martin being self-deprecating and walking back a bit how hard he was on House of the Dragon, that has to strictly follow my book, that they're not Benioff and Weiss changing things to pad their careers with awards. There are certain things that you need to fit in. Obviously, the lack of live rewrites due to the strike affected it, but there were changes even in season 1 that I can see why you do that for the purposes of adaptation. The whole point is we are not unreasonable people. Benioff and Weiss took advantage of our trust. But we're not these book purists that hate everything. Then if we're the book purists who deride any change, then they did nothing wrong. Where it's, no, this is beyond the beyonds. This is beyond the pale. Because motivation is a big thing. You didn't change this for the sake of adaptation. You changed it because you wanted to show off the actors and not to show them off for entertainment. Season 8 is nothing but a demo reel, a sizzle reel of shots showing off the actors. And I predicted that. I said, Season 5 onward, they just keep getting worse every year, where there's these nonsensical scenes showing off actors that people like. Why do you think Arya killed the Night King? Or other stuff like it. It's to get those big face shots. That's why they did that. A reasonable adaptation would need to change some things, and we can debate that. That's kind of what fandom does. But I don't know exactly what Martin was upset about. And a lot of people try to co-opt, oh, Martin's angry about things. He disagreed about things in an upcoming season. He made that clear. Resulting from, we can kind of guess, maybe it's cutting nettles. I hope that's all. It's not something even worse than that. But I can see why, well, we might need to merge nettles with someone because the character doesn't really have an ending. That kind of thing. But there's so many people going, Martin's upset about all the changes that make it woke. And like, have you read Martin's works? No, this has nothing to... It was poorly paced, those things. But this has nothing to do with your own specific agendas pulling one way or the other. So, I'm not sure on that, but Martin saying this, at first I thought it was him being self-deprecating, that, well, we all know how reasonable I've been about insisting on faithfulness. It's him admitting he was unreasonable, that there's constraints the TV writers are under that he actually sympathizes with now, or at least that he's walking back and has calmed down a little. Then Carmine, Red Team Review, he pointed out to me through private messages, no, this is Martin being sarcastic, that he genuinely believes he was entirely reasonable and that they took advantage of him. For what they said they're working on a big video on, is Martin reasonable? Their word before he said it, but with his dissatisfaction. Are they cutting things? The example I keep using is if they cut nettles, it'll be like cutting the Scouring of the Shire from Lord of the Rings, where I'm disappointed in it and I disagree with it, but I understand and intellectually I sympathize intellectually why they did it. Structurally, it would have made the thing longer, it would be difficult to fit in. They try to tonally fit that in, that you can't go home again. I still miss it, and I still think of it as the real ending supplementing that they just skipped over it, but it really not. But it wouldn't ruin the entire show to me if they got everything else right, acknowledging that adaptations sometimes need to merge or cut things like that when they give us reasons. Because the difference is, Benioff and Weiss were not writing during a writer's strike. Condell was. He did a better job in season 1 when there was no strike. And on top of this, when Benioff and Weiss changed things, their actual answer was the week after the Sansa rape, unrelated, but you could tell it was this screw you directed at us. Some of you, I know there was a big controversy last episode when the rape happened, that we had Tyrion meeting Daenerys early. Literally no one was talking about that. This is this giant screw you to us by backhandedly saying, for those of you annoyed that Tyrion met Daenerys early, creatively it made sense to us because we wanted it to happen. That was in an Entertainment Weekly public interview. That is in print. That happened. And no one criticized them for saying something that audacious. And Condell, in contrast, When he changed things like I changed Blood and Cheese a little, same week he went to the major fan site Westeros.org and put out a podcast interview with Elio and Linda, the co-authors of World of Ice and Fire, saying, this is why I made these changes. We don't 100% know if he was being honest, but at least he's giving justifications for why he did certain things. This is in no way comparable to how mistreated we were under the Benioff and Weiss years. And if you don't remember it, you're part of the problem. If you were just... Or maybe you in good faith didn't know because reporters were not covering how crazy they were. And there's more scrutiny now because, like addiction, it only stops when you hit rock bottom. That only after season 8 did I really notice people criticizing anything Benioff and Weiss said. And I'm like, they have always talked like this for 10 years. It got really worse starting in season 5 when they stopped even hiding it. But you really think this started in 2019? They have always been like this, and if you're only noticing now, it's because the media didn't want to cover it. They didn't want to reveal who the real person was. Condell, so far at least, has been honest with us, making outreach and defending why he did things, and I might end up disagreeing with him. It's a question of if I disagree with him so much, well, okay, I can see I need this to work for adaptation, or if I disagree with him so much that I really turn on it. I'd have to see season 3 before I judge it. What I have seen in season 2, there were one or two things, like, there's actually 3 things I'm going to make a video on it, but most of the characterization stuff and pacing I attribute to the strike, and a few other things like Kragan Stark wasn't in it that much. Then we found out he was going to show up in the finale, but it got cut for time because that's HBO screwing with them. I don't blame them for that. So apparently they want to use Kragan more, so I have to withhold judgment till I see more. It stinks being the better man, but we're not really sure what's going on, and it's a whole debate here, but in the clip I linked below, which is a short 4 minutes, but trust them more than me, Preston said, I looked at this quote, and it sounds like Martin saying how incredibly reasonable I am on that particular subject, is him going, I actually was kind of unreasonable when I really started quite the scuffle with HBO and Condell publicly 4 months ago. Carmine of Red Team Review said, no, this is Martin being sarcastic because he does feel he's entirely reasonable. So they said they are making upcoming videos about this. I'll link you to the point where in the live stream where they talk about it. And when it comes out, I'll update with the link to the videos they said specifically about what is Martin saying here. Is he? They said they recorded it but hadn't put it out yet. Is he delusionally thinking he's entirely reasonable, or is this him being self-deprecating and walking it back? I really don't know. I like to hope that things have improved enough behind the scenes that Martin is at least on speaking terms again with Condell, even if he disagrees with some changes that he made in good faith. That even if Condell cut Nettles, which we thought he did in season 1 based on things they were setting up, I would strongly disagree. I wouldn't feel it ruined the show. I would, if he got everything else right, which he generally has, and the other season 2 problems were from the strike. We think season 3 will be better because, as others have reported, Condell feels really optimistic now that all of their production stuff is in place. They aren't expanding to new locations. And for once, they're not filming during a major disaster. Season 1 was filmed during the pandemic. Season 2 filmed during a strike. And I have to repeat this over and over again. Please respond to this line specifically in the comments. I'm leaving it last here. I have said they couldn't do live rewrites, and repeatedly different people on multiple occasions have responded, but we have this cited quote that the scripts were handed in by December or January. What matters is that they're live rewrites. They're not an extension. They could have handed them in 5 years ago. Live rewrites are part of a live refinement process. It's a discourse between the writers, the actors, and the directors as the rubber meets the road, basically. That it doesn't matter how early you get the rough draft scripts, and there is always live rewrites need to be live. That's why they're vital. They're reassessing and refining what you're doing. I'm thinking of like machine manufacture, like gun manufacture. They openly say, we have to try a couple of prototypes. It is impossible to make one the first time cold with no revisions. Or, like, unless you're Mozart, writing stuff down as if it was dictation, if you're composing a song, you make rewrites that in some cases are impossible to do just on paper, that you need to perform it and hear how it's actually sounding before you do it. So just so many people going, we know they had the scripts by December. The emphasis here is on live rewrites. In reaction to seeing them actually filming this, they make changes. That's what a major point of what the strike was about. And they weren't allowed to do that, and I sympathize with that, and thankfully a lot of, like, mainstream news, like I've seen Den of Geek and Nerdist listing, we understand there was a writer's strike and that this affected their ability to do rewrites. Production-wise, I think everything will be in place they need. It's probably going to be an 8-episode season again. I'd like to think Season 4 will be supersized to 12 and aired in 2 halves, because that has been known to happen for, like, Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad and Mad Men and other shows. We'll have to see. I don't mind if it's an 8-episode season if we get more seasons, so, because it was relatively late in the game to change it. So I put this last because it's rambling, but the 2 issues we faced were, will audiences pick up on Dunk and Egg, even though there are no large-scale battles and no dragons and no fantasy creatures? It is a tournament. But there's been entire movies at a tournament, like A Knight's Tale. Mark Addy was in A Knight's Tale, remember? That's where I first knew him from, when he was cast as Robert Baratheon. That it's a tournament, there's action in it, it's a very tight, focused character piece. Instead of having a sprawling cast, it's hard for new viewers to understand. Very focused character piece on maybe a dozen characters with speaking lines at most that you actually think of and remember, that I could list off just on my fingers, the number of major characters, mostly the current Targaryens plus Dunk and Tancelli, and and Steely Pate also, that's on Team Dunk, but otherwise, yeah, I can see that working, that it's a format difference, that it's not like the other shows, is a selling point. And I wonder, tell me in the comments, how do you think the clickbaiters will respond to something like that, where you can't just hype up? It's not going to be the return of White Walker hype. Remember how much they hyped up, like, a Long Night prequel? It's going to be White Walkers. And then it turns out the Night King he's not even in the book. I don't think the Night King will be in the book. They just needed a generic evil overlord. And how much people overhyped that? Or there's going to be dragon battles literally every episode. I think they'd be literally every episode. That they pace that. And on the other side of things, the question of the moment, I might end up making another video about this if Martin talks more. But Preston and Red Team covered this, and I trust them more, and I defer to them. Is this one brief cryptic line, Martin being self-deprecating and showing his relationship is healing with Condal? Or is he doubling down? I'm letting you know, sometimes I am convinced it's one, sometimes I'm convinced it's the other. I started out thinking it was self-deprecation, Carmine convinced me no, it's completely the other thing, but then when Preston said, well no, I think it is self-deprecation, and like looking at Carmine's comments, one person independently of me said I thought that was self-deprecation, and it had 70 likes on it. So 70 other people watching his videos who also thought, well, this sounds like self-deprecation to me. We don't know. Is this going to be like The Dress? Remember The Dress, where is it black and white or is it gold and blue and dark lighting? We can't really tell what he meant by that line, and I hope he follows up on it more with future breaking news, and that's going to be one of the major things we're following. Is Martin's relationship with them going to heal or not after that big argument in September? I think Season 3 will be produced a lot more smoothly, because there isn't a last-minute episode count reduction or filming during a strike with no live rewrites. That it sounds like it's at least going to be smoother, which for a general audience, there's also the question of, even beyond faithfulness, does it work as a TV show? Regardless of, look, we made some mergers here and there, but it works. I like to think they're setting up a major comeback, that people will, the clickbaiters at least will come back as soon as Battle of the Gullet and all these major action scenes. They like action scenes even when they're not well written. But will we like it? I think so. There'll be action, there'll be actually delivering on these things. I cautiously have cautious optimism for Season 3. And that'll be this comeback story, and everyone goes, okay, it was a strike, we're okay, we're doing this again, because I liked the lore stuff in Season 2. I liked character moments in it. It was still something I enjoyed reporting on, that if Season 1 was a 9.5, I'd still give Season 2 a 7 out of 10. And I liked it more than I did, and then still put it in the top 10 list of the year, just not at number 1, but like at number 8. So share all of this, and please like and subscribe. We are out of the news dead zone. We're going to be getting, Martin has said, I'm going to be making more blog posts. Now it's not the holidays, catching up on even other things like the Worldcon stuff he did, and maybe he'll revisit. And here's my blog post about the blog posts I made back in September. And has he calmed down or not since then, and we'll say what's going on. And we are also getting casting announcements that just came out this week for House of the Dragon Season 3. So we are out of the winter news dead zone. Follow me after the jump, like, and subscribe, because after this I'm going to post the first casting video of Season 3. And who knows, any day they might be dropping the first Dunk and Egg reel teaser. Maybe during the Super Bowl, which is coming up this week, or next to the Super Bowl, because it's that season. Please stick around, I'll be covering all of this.